Our second inductee in the Writers Hall of Fame is Thomas D. Clark. To read an excerpt from Dr. Clark's work today, we have Dr. James Klotter. Dr. Klotter received his PhD in history from the University of Kentucky. He is the prize-winning author of, or co-author and editor of 18 books. He served as director of the Kentucky Historical Society and is now a professor of history at Georgetown College and is the state historian of Kentucky. He recently finished a book on Henry Clay and the American presidency. Please welcome Dr. James Klotter.
Thanks, Neil. As you can tell, I'm not one of the young authors that Neil was talking about. Although Dr. Clark called me young Jim Klotter always. I was young compared to him. So, a poet once noted, of all the arts in which the wise excel, nature's chief masterpiece is writing well. Dr. Clark wrote well in about 30 books, and it makes it very hard to pick his selections up here. You pick something that includes some of his comments on minor matters. For instance, in one of his books he wrote about beaten biscuits. He said, there are few combinations which they can be used with any degree of success. But my choices reflect two other things. Dr. Clark ability to say a lot in a few words. One of them is about country stores. It's from the book Pills, Petticoats, and Plows, which I still think is one of his best books, about the Southern country store. And it starts, he's talking about, they've taken a cotton crop from his native Mississippi, they've taken a cotton crop to market, they've sold it, they're coming home with goods now for the first time. Hunched over a spring seat, the cotton farmer jolted homeward, behind a jaded pair of mules with a can of kerosene, a hunk of meat, a pail of compound lard, and dust-covered bags of flour and meal. This was the store diet and transport. At home, wives sliced off thick slices of the Iowa meat, fried it for breakfast. Boiled hunks of it for dinner, fried more of it for supper. They thickened the gravy with flour and served it and molasses as sop for cornbread and biscuits. 3 times a day, 52 weeks a year, for many, was a monotonous year of meat, cornbread, biscuit, gravy, and molasses. And then he says, life for most of the customers of the country store was of a marked degree of whiteness. There was white meat, white gravy, white bread, white shortening for the table, white supremacy at the polls, and white glove for the pallbearer at the gravesite. It says a lot in just little words there. The other one is from his book, His History of Kentucky, that was mentioned. His 1937 history that was the dominant history of the state for 60 years. I wish my books would last that long. And here he's talking about the contemporary Kentuckian. He's writing in 1937 about the Kentuckians of 1930s that he knew at the time. He'd been in the state about 8 years by then. In his own mind, the contemporary Kentuckian is convinced that no other section compares favorably with his own. When a stranger is introduced, he is asked, are you a native Kentuckian? If he is a native son, he's accepted on the grounds of mutual understanding. But if not, the Kentuckian will recite Kentucky's traditions and history. History to the average Kentuckian, however, does not mean that his state was one of the first settlements in the West, or that it became an important commercial link between the North and the South. Instead, the history of Kentucky to the native son is a personal matter. It is not uncommon for a visitor to gather for a conversation with a local historian of a remote Kentucky village, a feeling that all civilization had its real start, and that all of his village and all of the events of national history had their beginning there. And then he says at the end, the pronounced state character has lent glamour and distinction to Kentuckians. Their home state with its history and tradition is their cherished possession. To a native son, there's no more musical name in the English language than Kentucky. He uses it not only as a noun, but also as an adjective. There are Kentucky hams, beaten biscuits, mint juleps, bean soup, kernels, lambs, whiskey, horses, rifles, feuds, and other products of peculiar value that only a Kentucky can give. And I would just note, Tom Clark was 5 months old when the first plane flew at Kitty Hawk. That plane is now in a museum in Mobile. His words, though, still soar.